We have some breaking news. A judge has sentenced Guy Reffitt to more than 7 years in prison.
That's right. We were speaking about this earlier. You may remember the 49-year-old Texas man was the first defendant to stand trial on charges stemming from the January 6th insurrection. Reffitt is a member of the far-right militia known as the Texas Three Percenters, and he was convicted of bringing a handgun into the Capitol on January 6th. Reffitt was found guilty on 5 criminal counts, including obstructing Congress's certification of President Biden's Electoral College win. He is facing up to let's move ahead now to Scott MacFarlane, who is joining us now from Washington, D.C. Scott, Mr. Reffitt sentenced to less than half the time prosecutors were pushing for. What's the judge's reasoning here?
Well, it's interesting, Errol. First of all, this is the longest prison sentence so far in any U.S. Capitol riot case. 7 years and 3 months is far longer than anybody else has been sentenced to so far. Put that marker down first, but then look at the other criteria. The prosecutors were seeking 15 years in prison, seeking the judge to add an enhancement for what they call domestic terrorism. The judge says the prosecutors didn't make their case on that, so she wouldn't allow that enhancement to be added. She did add other enhancements to what the prosecutors sought, so it ends up with 7 years and 3 months for Guy Reffitt. But his case was always important. Always had outsized importance because it was a canary in the coal mine case. He was the first defendant convicted at trial here in D.C. on a Capitol riot prosecution, so it's laying down a marker for other defendants to look at. And it's not clear what picture those other defendants are getting. 7 years and 3 months is the longest, but far shorter, Errol, than prosecutors were seeking.
And Scott, how significant is Reffitt's sentencing hearing today? Like, what impact could that have maybe on other cases moving forward?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a significant high-level case, but not the highest level. Reffitt didn't get inside of the Capitol. Prosecutors didn't allege any specific assaults by him against police officers. There are other defendants accused of conspiracy, seditious conspiracy, of fighting in hand-to-hand combat with police. And their case is still to come. But Reffitt was accused of having a gun on his waist when he confronted police. He was accused of being here on Capitol grounds with a tactical helmet with a bulletproof vest, so his case was distinctive. It was unique, but not the highest level. There are trials later this year for the accused seditious conspirators who will face significantly longer prison sentences than 7 years if convicted. So it's not the high watermark, just an indicator of where similar cases are headed. There are any number of defendants accused of being on the front lines facing off with police, still have to have their cases disposed of.
Fascinating to me that this is the sentence for someone who didn't even enter the Capitol building. So many others did. Was there anything in what the judge said in this ruling that gives us a clue as to how other cases may or may not be determined as far as the sentencing there also?
It's a great point, Errol. There is a remarkable range in the cases from that one historic, horrific American day. There are people accused of just being in the building and immediately exiting, not touching anything or anyone. They're largely pleading guilty to misdemeanors, not even facing jail sentences. There are those accused of plotting and planning months ahead of January 6th, of bringing gear and money, in some cases guns, to the area. They face many years. But there are so many cases in the middle. And one thing the judge said at sentencing I think is impactful is she is trying to measure those who seem truly remorseful from those who seem to be apologizing to secure leniency and get lighter prison sentences. Judges are trying to detect who's truly remorseful and who's not. And one way she's measuring that, and one way other judges are measuring that, is by how much those defendants denounce the moment, the politics, the election lies, the fraud claims they made. This judge didn't buy the apology fully given by Guy Reffitt today at sentencing, saying his words don't seem to match his most recent words while in jail, where he continues to call January 6th a false flag, continues to deny the results of the 2020 election. That might be the Rorschach test moving forward for defendants. How much true remorse do they show when they ask for leniency?
It is really a fascinating investigation, and Scott's been all over it. Scott MacFarlane, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We want to take you now to Washington, where Guy Reffitt's his daughters actually just spoke with reporters, so let's watch that.
And American families cannot be divided by indoctrination over us Americans being divided. Americans are not a united country. We are divided, and that is not okay. Especially because it was Trump's name on the flags. That's what I meant. That's all I meant.
And I think it really paints a bigger picture. To mark my dad as this horrible person, and then having him prosecuted like this when somebody is maybe even able to get elected again, doesn't seem right to me.
Trump deserves life in prison if my father's in prison for this long. He is the one. Edward Bernays, Aldous Huxley, that's where I get my beliefs from. And my parents raised us to be free thinkers and to have our own thought. They did not raise us to a one-pointed point of view. That's all.
That mom has repeatedly urged other parents and defense to not accept plea deals. But we heard the judge today say that your father probably could have gotten sentenced to 2 less years in prison if he had taken a plea deal. Do you think that your father made a mistake in not taking a plea deal? Would you also urge, like your mother, other January 6th defense to not take a plea deal?
I would suggest that we don't urge anyone to do anything. I think that's going to be up to the person, especially because we don't have that type of opinion.
Yeah.
But for my father, we were also told, we were under the impression that a trial would be very good. We were told that we had a good fight. And of course, for some of the things, I'd like to say, it didn't seem like he was actually guilty. The obstruction of justice, I know that there are...
Especially with the charge of him threatening me and my brother, I was there and I can truly say he was not speaking directly to us. He was he was ranting off. He was not threatening to kill us. And my brother has said multiple times that he did not think that his intention was to actually go through with something like that.
What about what your dad said at court today?
We're in a very, very, very difficult situation with what's going on, and we haven't had an answer until now. So we haven't had any knowing of what to do or how to move forward. So he has just, from what he can, his hands are tied. He's just trying to help our family be able to recover from this.
And I also think a lot of the reason he wanted to talk about, especially the Gibson Go letters, is because that was one of the only form of letters that he's really ever sent out. So it is on a GoFundMe page. It is on like a Gibson Go. And I do think that he has a lot of truth of talking mainly to the other 1-6ers families that we are going to fight this. We are going to be okay. I don't think he's acting resilient towards the government in any way or the prosecution. I think he's just saying we have to stay strong. I didn't really see any. I see a lot of media. They say that it looks like he's being really diligent, or he's not sorry at all. I never really read into it like that, but maybe it's just because I feel like I know.
We don't make enough money to stay in our home, so that is why that's where his concern came from. And Jackson has also been able to raise money for himself and his school. And I just graduated high school, so I'll be looking forward to moving on from this situation.
How is your family going to press forward about this event?
We really don't know.
I don't know yet.
We're just going to stay together.
Tell.
We're going to stay together.
Okay. Let's go. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been listening to Guy Reffitt's children speak after their father was sentenced to more than 7 years in prison. It's really fascinating what they were talking about and how they're trying to defend their father.
We spoke about this privately earlier. Let's bring back in Scott MacFarlane, who was also listening, because one of the things that jumps out to us, Scott, is that these cases, not just this one, but so many of them seem to have divided families. Some people turning their own relatives in. His daughter's there saying, Trump deserves life in prison if my dad's getting jail time, a loose quote there. What was your reaction to hearing those young women?
Errol, I've listened to dozens of January 6 sentencings and plea hearings. I've never heard anything close to what you just heard from Guy Reffitt's daughter. I have never heard a defendant or a family member speaking at a sentencing so sharply and demonstratively criticize former President Trump. Never heard a defendant or a relative say Donald Trump should be sent to prison or jail. That was a distinctive, unique moment just there from Guy Reffitt's daughter. She spoke during the sentencing today. I was in the courtroom and she spoke just briefly. In fact, she was quite overpowered by the moment. She needed some time to collect herself before she spoke again. But she gave muted criticism of Donald Trump in the court. She argued her father wasn't a leader that day, as prosecutors had alleged. She said the person whose name was on the flags in the mob was the leader, not her dad. But she didn't say Donald Trump. She didn't say former President Trump. She just referred to him as the person whose name was on the flags. Then she comes out of court. Somebody asks her about that quote. Not only does she name Donald Trump, but she leans into this argument that Donald Trump deserves life in prison if her father is to serve those 7 years. Let's see if that has any impact in the many cases moving forward. But it's also worth reinforcing the unique backstory of this family. Guy Reffitt's son testified against him at trial, turned him in to authorities. He wasn't there today. His son wasn't there at sentencing. He wrote a letter of support for his father, but Reffitt's daughter was. And when she came out of court today, you heard her criticize the former president and say it's not fair her father's going to jail if Donald Trump is not. I'll just tell you, having watched all these cases, never seen anything like that or heard anything like that from one of these families or one of these defendants.
Anyone here watching the CBS News stream, watch that happen live. Pretty remarkable, Scott. We appreciate your insight and reporting as always. Thank you.